Hello, and welcome to the video on basic trigonometry. And basically those things are sine, cosine, and tangent. So now you're going to know what those buttons on your calculator, the SIN, the COS, and the TAN. So the SIN is sine, the COS is cosine, and the TAN is tangent. Okay, so I asked a question in the last video, what is trigonometry? Basically, trigonometry just deals with the relationship, the relationship between the sides and angles of triangles. Okay, what we're going to be dealing with is right triangles. Okay, you can do it without the right triangles, but with basic trig, we're just doing right triangles. Okay, the sides and angles of right triangles. I hope you guys aren't getting tired of triangles. This is one of my favorite units, and last year the students loved this unit, so it's going to look a little bit confusing, but I think we're going to have a good time. All right, so I just want to talk a little bit about the first part of your notes. Remember we talked about triangle similarity, so if you had two angles, not sides, if you had two angles that were congruent, that meant that the triangles were similar. Okay, so if I have two triangles and they're right triangles, okay, they're not the same size, right? So they're right triangles, and these two angles are congruent. So by default, the 90 degrees angles are congruent, so we know that these two angles are congruent. Okay, so we know that they're similar. Now, when you have two similar triangles, the sides are going to be proportional, okay? So if this one is 4, and this one's 2, this one's 8, it has to be 4. Okay, so that's the relationship. So basically what we're going to be talking about is that if you have the same angle, the ratio is going to be the same on each triangle, okay? Because if you do 4 to 8, you get 1/2. If you do 2 to 4, you get 1/2, right? So you have the same ratio. That's basically all this is. Okay, so a little bit of vocabulary. Let's say we've got our triangle here, and we've got our right angle. Okay, so let's start with angle A over here. Okay, on your notes is talking about the opposite leg. So opposite is something that is directly across, okay? And the other one is talking about adjacent to angle A. So that means that it is next to angle A. And this will always be called the hypotenuse. Even though it's adjacent, it always has the definition of being a hypotenuse. Okay? So if you've got this triangle, and let's say we're talking about this angle up here. Okay, this side right here is opposite of that angle. This side is adjacent, and then the hypotenuse is always the hypotenuse. Okay, and the reason you need to know that vocabulary is just going to be really, really important when we're doing the ratios. Okay, so let's first talk about sine. Right, and the abbreviation is going to be SIN. All right, so if you have a triangle, and we have this angle, so let's say that's angle A. Okay, so sine, the definition of sine, we're talking about the ratio, is the opposite, so the ratio of the opposite side to the hypotenuse. All right, so we would do, oops, let me do a different color. This is the opposite side, right? This one right here. And then this one is the hypotenuse. So you would put the opposite side, so let's say this is x and that's y. It would be x over y. Okay, and we'll talk about figuring out what that means. Okay, so just know that the sine is the opposite over the hypotenuse. Now luckily you do have your formula chart, so you don't necessarily have to memorize it. But we'll talk about a way that you can memorize it here in a second. All right, so cosine. Okay, its abbreviation is COS, cos. All right, so that one is equal to the adjacent leg, so the ratio of the adjacent leg to the hypotenuse. So let's say we've got this triangle. All right, and let's say we're dealing with this, and I'm going to do let's keep it C, A, B. Okay, so we're going to do this angle right here. So the side adjacent to this angle is A, so this one right here is A, and then the hypotenuse is always going to be, the hypotenuse is C. So it's going to be the ratio between the adjacent and the hypotenuse. All right, now for tangent. I like tangent, not sure why, I just do. Okay, and that one is TAN. All right, and this ratio is talking about the opposite over the adjacent. If you notice, this one doesn't have a hypotenuse in it. Okay, so here's my triangle. Let's do this angle. All right, so let's do CAB again. All right, so we're doing the opposite. Opposite of the angle is A, and adjacent to the angle is B. Now we don't use C again because even though it is adjacent to that angle, it is not considered adjacent. It is always considered the hypotenuse. All right, so let's talk about how to do it easily. Okay, sine is opposite over hypotenuse, and you have a little chart on your notes. Cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse, and tangent is opposite over adjacent. So if you take those and you write them as a word, we have so, ka, to, oh, I wrote the word toe, sorry. Okay, so you can kind of say it to yourself, so, ka, toa, so, ka, toa. So when you say so, you know it's opposite hypotenuse, ka, adjacent hypotenuse, and to is tangent. I don't know, to me that's easy to remember. Sometimes it's easier to know it instead of always looking to your formula chart, but this is a reference for you, and again, it will always be on your formula chart. All right, so now let's get into using numbers and kind of figuring out how to do this. All right, so here's our triangle, and the first one is telling you to find the sine of angle R. Okay, so remember, sine is equal to opposite over hypotenuse. So here's angle R, so the number opposite it is 40, and the side that's the hypotenuse is 41. Okay, so that's how you would set up that equation. So it would be the sine of R is equal to the ratio of the opposite to the hypotenuse, which is 40 over 41. All right, so let's do the next one, and that is tangent. So we're going to find tangent of angle T, right? And tangent, remember, if you're looking, is opposite over adjacent. Okay, so the tangent of angle T is equal to, this is angle T, the opposite side, which is 9, and the adjacent side, which is 40. So the tangent of T is equal to 9 over 40. All right, number 3 is the cosine of blank is equal to 9 over 41. So we want to know what angle are they talking about. So we've got 9 and they've got 41. So 9, we know 41 is going to be the hypotenuse. Okay, so cosine means opposite, adjacent over hypotenuse. So that means that the adjacent side, the hypotenuse has to be the 41. Okay, so we know we're talking about 41. Okay, so what we're looking at here is we are trying to decide which angle it is. So we know that the hypotenuse is 41 no matter what. But we need an adjacent angle that is equal, adjacent side that is equal to 9. If we're doing T, its adjacent side is 40. And then if we're doing R, its adjacent side is 9. Okay, so we know that it has to be the cosine of angle R.